I now hand over to Mr. Srinivasan to take this session forward.
Thank you. I think even FPOs have to make some noise to be heard. So we have to first switch on one of the basic ecosystem requirements as the session goes. So I welcome all of you. Hopefully the lunch was not far too heavy. And here also we got a very heavy panel to compensate for any shortfall on the lunch side. So let me welcome all of you to this very important discussion in the context of how we look at farming and farmers' access to a wide variety of services, which currently, as per both policy and also by operational resources, we are betting on farmer producer organizations big time to make them come forward and solve problems of farmers on the ground in a manner that's much more effective than in the past. Here I have got a fantastic panel full of experience, and of course we have got Michael with international experience, who is going to talk a bit about the kind of work that International Fund for Agricultural Development is doing in the sphere of smallholder farmers and the work under value chain, which will maximize their incomes and then improve their livelihoods. So he will shortly be taking us through what are the different things that have been done. So the initial 15 minutes will be spent on that. Then we have the panelists from the Indian context looking at what does the operating environment look like for the farmer producer organizations, and how to make it more friendly, more comfortable, more easier for the FPOs to operate so that they can perform or fulfill their objective of ensuring that their members become better off over the long term. So in a nutshell, this is how the session would be. After the initial presentation of 15 minutes, this will be a conversational kind of a session. My request will be that you all could write out any questions you might have in a small piece of paper. I hope there is paper available on the tables. Send it across so that we don't need to wait toward the end of the session to bring your questions in. I would already ask your question in your name. If it comes in, try and blend it with the conversation. So any concern that we have, we may not get solutions, but they will certainly be discussed. And we will see whether the concern is deeper than what we have, or there are already things in the horizon which will solve, which will address our concerns. So I hope you got a brief of who are the panelists here. Shubhendra is from Access itself. He is dealing with the FPOs as part of the Access family. Shambhu Prasad, professor, he is the professor for FPOs, producing lots of knowledge where by writing cases, by writing conclusive reports and helping other people also to bring out stories from the field. Anil is the CEO of Samunati Finance, which provides both market-led solutions for FPOs and also financial solutions for their credit needs. But their work goes far beyond that. Some of you would already be knowing Samunati from the field present. Michael, as I said, is a senior technical specialist working with IFAD Rome. He has responsibility for running the SAFIN program in a number of countries. He would briefly mention that when he presents what he is actually doing. And Srinivas comes from a very different background compared to all others. It's a market platform which is specializing in logistics, and how they are connecting with FPOs is probably the story that we will hear later that day. So with this, I would now request Michael to start off his presentation. And yeah, Michael, the floor is yours.
So, thank you, everyone. So my name is Michael Van During. I'm the technical specialist, as we just mentioned, for SAFIN. The SAFIN program, actually it stands for the Smallholder and Agri SME Finance and Investment Network. The network itself is housed under IFAD, so we're based in Rome. And to give you a sense, let me see if I can do this here, of who we are. So essentially, we're the only global network for agri-SME finance that we know of. The value proposition is essentially that we try to create a collectively owned space for our partners to come together, share knowledge, try to identify gaps, and then essentially collaborate on the development of knowledge and collaborative solutions to address them. The mission is really to leverage this wide variety of partners in order to build exclusive and or effective and inclusive ecosystems. So that's going to what we'll be talking about in terms of FPOs. How can we improve those ecosystems? From a SAFIN point of view, really focused on agri-SME finance, which includes FPOs. So why agri-SMEs in particular? Well, we all know that there's, first of all, from the supply side, in terms of finance and solutions, just a very wide variety of actors that don't necessarily work together. The lack of coordination leads to, competitive approach in certain cases. Also, failure to be able to reach the level of scale that would be required or that would be an opportunity. Duplication of certain activities or mutual crowding out. So the issue is also felt on the demand side for the agri-SMEs, who basically just see this crowded field that they don't really know how to access finance from. Other issues that we know is that, there's difficulties bridging this early stage finance, the seed capital, to sort of the later stage types of finance, or bringing, international funders together to collaborate or coordinate their work with the local investors. So all of these issues are, some of the areas that we try to bring some type of order to by bringing this network of partners together. So who are the network? We have 56 partners for the time being, and as you can see from the screen here, it's a really varied set. And the idea here is to bring different perspectives. So bringing that international side together with some of the local actors on the supply sides, bringing some of the development agencies together, bringing some of the actors on the ground, agri-SMEs, networks of farmer producer organizations, and being able to cover all angles. And that's really helpful in terms of sharing that knowledge. To give you a sense, sort of from a local perspective, you can see some of the actors here. Obviously, Access is one of our main partners here in India. We also have Rabobank, who's represented here. And I've actually taken the liberty to try to see who we have maybe, represented here in India, and we have about 30 partners that are either directly active with presence in India or are working from abroad to work on projects in the country. So how do we go about doing this work, right? So essentially, in terms of the focus areas, we try to convene. We bring people together to basically build the ecosystem. We focus the discussions and the actions around specific areas of interest. We try to influence the ecosystem, and that's at a local level, policy level, international discussions. And we also try to track the opportunities for collaboration, moving to that co-creation bit where we actually get people to actively work together. So in terms of priorities, for me, this really sort of falls into three main buckets, which is one, just this creation of a community of diverse actors that can speak around a shared message with a shared set of priorities, an understanding of what we're going to be focusing our work on, sharing the existing knowledge from all of those different perspectives, but also identifying gaps that need to be addressed. And finally, trying to get those people to actively work together by finding the opportunities where it makes most sense for them to collaborate. So what's our journey been? How is this translated into actual work? We were launched in a pilot phase in 2018, and the focus here for the 3 years of that pilot phase were really on the one hand, creating knowledge, which was very much focused on blended finance and trying to understand the power of blended finance to improve access to finance for agri-SMEs, but also with the development of what we were calling investment prospectuses, which we've worked on in India, specifically on the minor millets value chain, with access here over the period of 2019 to 2021 when the report was published. And that was an attempt to basically create a report that tells us exactly where the issues lie, what SAFN partners and other actors are present in the ecosystem that we're trying to address, and then proposing a very concrete plan on how we can move forward to address that in a collaborative way. I should also mention that when specific crises pop up, particularly those of an international level, like COVID-19, we tend to sort of take that opportunity to also address those, to try to understand early on what the issues are. At the end of 2020, we moved to the actual SAFN 2.0, as we call it, and we really focused on the generation of knowledge with a more focused look. And this is where we started looking into 4 thematic areas where we brought our partners together around, starting with green finance, and some work around understanding the present state of green finance, very much at a global level, and trying to understand what the opportunities were going forward and some of the key innovations that should be addressed. With that sort of set, we then moved on to looking at partnerships, because partnerships made most sense for the network. So what's the power of partnerships in order to improve the delivery of green finance, but also improving that access? And we've done a number of webinars, one with Rabobank and Samunati, talking about their partnership on a guarantee fund. And we also published a number of learning notes that sort of tried to consolidate some of the key points that we had learned over that period. So this was a 2-year learning agenda. The next one was around farmers' organizations. So this links up very closely to what we're going to be discussing here. And the important thing that we've done there is we launched a survey that covered 5 regions, 19 countries in East Africa, West Africa, India, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific, and try to understand what was the current access to finance of farmers' organizations, what were some of their remaining needs, gaps that needed to be addressed, what were some of the key challenges that they continued to face, and then we also tried to get a sense of what role did green finance play in there. So what was the impact of climate issues to their own operations, and how were they receiving funding or funding their activities to address those? Finally, we also addressed digital innovations, and we have a report that's going to be coming out soon, and this one focuses on East and Southern Africa, to understand what is the landscape of digital innovations that can improve access to finance for agri-SMEs, and what are the key drivers to actually improve their ability to reach commercial sustainability, but also to reach scale or to achieve scale What's the role of concessional finance? At what point should it come in? So that will be an interesting one that's going to be coming out soon. And a final one is around what we call the agri-SME support environment, but that's really around business development services and understanding what type of business development services can be provided most efficiently, and this is from an economic perspective, so that money isn't wasted in these types of services, and understanding which ones are most apt, sort of given the cost that they impose, to actually improve growth and access to finance for agri-SMEs, but in this case, it's also including FPOs. So this is also going to be something that we're excited about coming out over the next month, I believe. So this all translated into this timeline here, which is the 2 years between 2021 and 2022, with the different activities that we launched. And again, in terms of one international crisis, we did pause to try to understand the impact of the war in Ukraine, which really led us actually to work we're going to be doing with FAO to try to understand the impact of crises generally on agri-SMEs and FPOs, particularly in terms of financing. So we're looking at the providers of finance to see how their portfolios vary in times of crisis. So going ahead now, 2023, we're taking these learnings and we're moving to try to learn from what's worked and what hasn't worked so well, and essentially bringing in a new approach, which is going to be regional in nature. And the idea here is to basically build on the learning agenda, try to apply some of these, the learnings and the research there at a regional level where it's most relevant. And so working with our partners in different areas on specific thematic issues, and then sharing that knowledge across the network, so at a global level, but then continuing work within the groups that have been formed at the regional level to see whether there's opportunities to collaborate around the design of specific solutions to address the issues that have been identified. And so finally, looking ahead at India, we're looking at a number of different possible points of entry for this region, which has so much going on in all of the different areas that we're focusing on, be it green finance, be it FPO finance, or digital innovations. And we're considering actually expanding some of the work that we've done around the FPO survey to zero in really on India to get a much better sense of the variety of issues and types of FPOs here, and try to understand and really pinpoint some of those areas of challenges and needs in order to bring the SAFIN partners around the development of a potential solutions. There's a number of other areas that we can look at. We're very much into sort of cross-cutting different thematic issues to address from that knowledge perspective to then build solutions around. And so we're very much open to any suggestions that you may have. I think that's it for me, and I'll pass it back on for the discussion on FPOs. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for something that's very clearly relevant in the context of what we are going to do in the financing space for agriculture. And I think the series of steps taken as a multilateral interested in different countries, what you have done, we already see lots of things that are potent in what's done with what we are about to discuss. And thank you so much. And I am very curious about the 19-country, 3-region survey you did. Later, I have a couple of questions to ask of that, as to what you found that's very different from other places that's here and what was potential. So to kick off the session, when we talk about an ecosystem in which the FPOs operate. So we have got an influence that comes from the governmental system by means of law, by means of policy. Then you have got influences that come from the financial systems, whether they make available enough money to work with, enough loans being available. You also have the places where the FPOs buy things, sell things, farmers buy and sell things, the market systems, how they work. And we also require the people and the FPOs to become capable, to become knowledgeable, to become skillful. Someone should provide the knowledge, the skills, the training, the capacity. What are those systems that provide resource support? And every good idea requires a push. Who are the people that push? Is it civil society organizations? Is it people sitting in government offices? Or is it private individuals who think if something happens better with farmers as a group, the community as a whole will benefit? Who are these people? How they are equipped? So when we talk about an ecosystem, there are a number of elements that come in. So here we have got people who understand more than one element of these ecosystems. Some of them might know several. So we are going to draw upon their experience to understand what's happening to FPOs. Are they operating in a space which is comfortable or uncomfortable, and what we have got to do further. I think to start with, I will request whether to come forward and then talk to us about what he is seeing in the way FPOs operate, in the midst of what they are operating, and what enables. And so then it will be helpful if you, from your point of view, if you can isolate some of the more important elements which have a major influence in terms of impact, in terms of effectiveness of FPOs on the ground. And then we carry the conversation further. So you will have about some 4 minutes time. My only request is, there are lots of people here जिनको हिंदी में परिचय ज़्यादा है. So some key messages अगर आप हिंदी में बोलेंगे वो अच्छा रहेगा.
Thank you, sir, for this opportunity. I would just like to share that we have been witnessing the FPO journey since last almost 14 years. The kind of transformation the ecosystem has been through. The first transformation, whenever an FPO was there going to a banker for opening a bank account, nobody knew about an FPO, and we had to struggle for 3 to 4 months for just opening a FPO bank account. Earlier, whenever the FPO was opening a bank account, they needed a PAN card. Earlier, the registration certificate of FPO was not coming with a PAN number. So now the FPO registration comes with a PAN number. You can just imagine the way of transformation even the system is bringing in. A very critical element is the support system of local governance. The Department of Agriculture, which is responsible for giving seed license, fertilizer license, pesticide license. 14 years before, when I initiated my FPO journey along with Access, we were looked upon like anything, and getting a license, it was a tedious task. As on date, anywhere you go in India, any government department, any agriculture officer who is in charge of licensing, starting from the block level to the state level and the central level, everybody now knows about FPOs. As far as I have seen, most of the recent FPOs that we have worked with for licensing and all, the processing is immediate, within 2 to 3 days in many cases, barring few which is always out of norms. We could not think of finances. Only banking option was there. There were very few limited options were available, and only, as far as I know, we had 1 or 2 organizations who were supporting FPOs in financing. It was very difficult. If you go to a bank, 3 years balance sheet. It's very difficult for a FPO to, for the first 3 years, it's the survival. जिए या मरे, 3 साल उनका ऐसा जाता है, पैसा हाथ में होता नहीं है, लाख रुपए से स्टार्ट करते हैं, they start their working capital with 1 lakh, then they don't have any capital, and then going to the market. Now, with Samunnati, NAP Kisan, FWW was there from the very beginning, Ananya. We have a ecosystem players wherein APO, if they have a good business plan and if the intent of the board of directors and the support or the promoting agency is there, it is now not a difficult task to get finance. To begin with, maybe 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs. It depends upon the APO, their working capital, their paid up capital like that. So while these are few examples, I have very limited time, so I won't go in detail. I can speak on the whole day about the challenges and plus minus everything. So there is a tremendous transformation, and it's all we all the ecosystem players that we are doing. Still, the biggest challenge as on date, even we are working with currently 170 plus live FPUs. In last 14 years, Access has supported almost around 250 FPUs. There is a tremendous learning we have from that. The biggest challenge that we see is what we do when, because we all work on mostly project basis. There is a program from Government of India or from funding donor agencies. So what after the project? Whether the APO is able to bear the cost of the CEO. जितने भी APO आप यहाँ बैठे हैं, अपने CEO की सैलरी उठा सकते हैं क्या? एक स्टाफ की सैलरी उठा सकते हैं क्या? ये सबसे बड़ी क्वेश्चन है. And likewise, the planning, management, what I have seen, APOs, they are very good even working at the local level. But when we talk about speaking to a national level, national buyers, there still will be some challenge. So in Access, we have experimented a lot on these also. So even after the programs are over, though we are not having intensive engagement, but at least we are supporting them some market linkage. If they will get loan, then we are providing them support. So those kind of things are still continuing. Another one biggest challenge that we face as on date is what the buyers want. Today we have a buyer side also, we will also listen to that. Many buyers we have spoken to. So apart from finance, FPO converges to quality norms. Many cases, what happens, the buyer comes, we arrange to get a good buyer, the buyer is there, buyer is ready to take, buyer has given an order of 100 metric ton, next day truck is coming and FPO simply says we are not able to supply because our farmers are not given. That is another biggest challenge. So in Access, we are also working in a very systematic manner to address the challenges, 3 challenges that we say: quality, quantity and timeline. Price being fixed for a particular lot that they book for the company. If the FPOs are able to give quality produce of the required quantity, if 100 MT is booked, then 100 MT has to be given. If they give 90 MT, then that's not a supply contract. And timeline, if they have to supply within 3 days, then that too within 3 days. So जितने भी FPO भाई बहन हमारे साथ हैं, मैं ये चीज एक खाली रिपीट करना चाहूंगा कि क्वालिटी, क्वांटिटी और टाइम, ये 3 चीज अगर कहीं पर भी किसी भी FPO ने हमारे साथ मिलके उसको लिया है तो बहुत अच्छे सक्सेस है. आज मेरे साथ में बैठे हैं 5 करोड़ की FPO है 2 साल के अंदर, 1 साल के अंदर 50 लाख की FPO है. सो ट्रेंड अच्छी है, हम सबकी थोड़ी सी सपोर्ट भी चाहिए, थोड़ी सी अंडरस्टैंडिंग चाहिए एंड आपकी भी मेहनत चाहिए साथ में. थैंक यू सर.
Thank you for detailing quite a bit of issues in the ecosystem. But when you were speaking about finance, you said there is a change taking place. Finance is now available. All the 4 names were not that of banks. I don't know whether that was conscious or that is the reality of the market. So let us test it with Anil.
Well, I thought the turn is sequential. Okay. But anyhow, practitioner, I'll come in. Right? So banks come in later, usually. And just on a lighter note, because it's a post-lunch session, it's like when everything is done and in a movie, the climax is over and the police come with a gun and then say, oh, I'm here now to take care. Right? That's the nature of, because there is a huge value. Usually the movie ends with the police coming in and after that there is happiness forever. Right? So I'm sure when the banks come in, there will be happiness forever because they are the ones who can bring scale. Right? All of us basically, perhaps be part of the plot and mess up the things and then there is a climax and then, happy forever. But having said that, we certainly see a lot of green shoots with the co-lending structures coming in. But I'll step back a little bit to build on what Shubhendu was mentioning. The FPO world, when Samunati started, it was 2015 actually, when we stumbled into the FPO space. And I would like to thank Girija ma'am for, I made 2 calls, which I keep repeating every time. One call was to Girija ma'am, the second call was to Vijay ma'am, right? And within half an hour of these conversations, both of them said, this is the area where you need to go and just go ahead. And I remember I was on the terrace of our Tiruvannamalai office when I called. We stumbled into this space to basically leverage 2 kinds of capitals that the community-based organizations, whether you call them FPOs or cooperatives or societies or whatever is the legal name that you give them, the underlying principle being the principle of collective benefit. One is the social capital, knowing what their members need and what their requirements are. And second one is the transaction history, the trade capital. Now, the formal financial institutions don't have the ability to underwrite these 2 capitals in a way where credit decisions can be made and loan be given. And that's why they insist on surrogates in terms of 3 years balance sheet and 3 years profitability, track record, so on and so forth. The beauty of how the FPOs operate in any case is that they know what their members need, they know what their geography needs, and the most heartening thing to notice is that some of the FPOs, through their BODs, are also willing to stick their neck out in giving their personal guarantees because they don't have collateral. Expecting them to give collateral is, having a contract void ab initio. They are not corporates, or they are not individual, companies. Collateral is out of question. I really stumbled upon a nice concept that I learned about 2 weeks ago in Hindi. They said, what we have, बहुत सारे दोस्त यहाँ जो उपस्थित है वो मानते हैं कि विश्वास की पूंजी हम लेके आ सकते हैं, which is the capital of trust that our people have placed in us is what we can put on the table to be able to structure, right? So somebody has to, or somebody had to stick our neck out, and there are some people like me who have the habit of compulsive risk taking. So we got into, the FPO funding space, and one thing led to the other. It has been like peeling of an onion, one thing leading to the other, and very happy to note that some of the FPOs now are clocking, 7-8 digit turnovers, and with small amounts. Right, today morning there was a session again in the same place where a couple of FPOs came together, and I'm sure they are here perhaps. They said a small working capital of 5-10 lakhs catalyzing a turnover of 1.5-2 crores. And that is what finance can do. It is a lubricant, but we also realize that finance is important but not sufficient. You have to bring in market linkages. Once you have market linkages, then do you have 2.5 crore, 4 crore turnover is great, but do they have the institutional capability to handle that kind of money? Right? They're like our children. You can only entrust them to a responsibility that they are capable of handling. Building the capability of they handling that responsibility is something where institutions like Access Development Services and a host of other capacity building organizations can come together. So the big realization for us being in the lending space is, you have this chana and dant theory, where जिसके पास चना है उसके पास दांत नहीं, और जिसके पास दांत है चना नहीं है, right? The one who has the nuts don't have the teeth, and the one who has teeth does not have the nuts to basically eat. Now the role of entities like ourselves is, can we match this? Not no teeth and no chana, but teeth and chana, right? That would make a difference in terms of bringing in people, and that's what we are seeing in many of the FPOs. The last point I would like to make is the profile of the FPO promoters is changing. And this is a parallel that at least I am observing, and many of the people are from the microfinance industry, right? You would see microfinance industry prior to 1998-2000 to say up to 2004-2005, where the transition between a community-based NGO-led development approach to they becoming NBFCs and then becoming lending institutions and becoming corporates, all the way to now, operating in public market space, right? We see that 98-2000 transition happening in the FPO space quite palpably, in the last 2 years. 2019, prior to 2019, it's a different story. Post 2019, with the 10,000 FPOs and the implementation agencies going up, then the CPPOs going up, that there are many things happening. All of that leading to many entrepreneurs and progressive farmers now taking the FPO as a vehicle. Well, it has its own dimensions. Anything that is growing very fast, I remember, again, I will not take the name of the organization because I'm from that. We went to meet a customer in, I would say, about 99, 2000. And one of these corporates said, I certainly see your institution growing really fast, but I really don't know whether you have effective braking system, and hence I will not, put my money into your institution. So anything that grows fast, we have to see whether there are effective controls, effective governance structures, effective risk mitigation mechanisms. That is where, all of us who are interested in this space have to watch out for. And Michael's presentation beautifully brought out the aspects of the hand-holding dialogue and bringing effective stakeholders on convening them, which he said would be important dimensions. But from FPO dimension, we cannot expect them to grow on their own. We have to play the role, but we are all ringmasters outside. They are in the ring. We have to let them play. And that would be my request to the CBBOs and RIs that let them make. The last point I would like to make is on the opportunity cost. Maybe in the next round I pick that up, sir. Better. Right. Sure.
Thanks, Anand. So चना भी और दाग भी दोनों आ रहा है. So Srinivas ji, from your what do you call experience, because you work on a very different orbit when it comes to working with them. How you have experienced the ecosystem of FPOs? क्या आपको भी कुछ चना वगैरह लेके आना पड़ता है to meet the FPOs? Yes.
Okay. Hi everyone. Thanks for this opportunity, access, and the panelists. Everyone, hi. So I am coming from a different background, as he mentioned. I represent a company called Zepto, right? It's called 10 minutes delivery. So down the line, not even 2 years before COVID also, nobody heard about what is a 10 minutes delivery. Now within this session, we can deliver multiple times. Right? This is what the power of technology right now we have. Why I'm coming and why I'm telling all of that? Just because Zepto is a platform for all the traders, you can say all your FPOs and whoever wants to sell, right? We are a buyer side. And I'm just mentioning in terms of a buyer lens, consumer lens. I'm representing that only. Everybody is talking about the FPOs, how to develop the FPOs, what are the intent behind that, and also how FPO should work. And whatever you do, the profitability will be the one thing that everybody wants to go for that, right? And here, as a platform, we want to guarantee that, or we can provide, and you can leverage out from us the profitability. But for that, what needs to be done, right? So, as not here in Zepto, in last almost 10-15 years, I have been working with most of the FPOs in different organizations. I found two things. One is the intent, right? The intent is really good, and the intent pace during the initial days is on a very high side, right? Whenever it goes within the time, it got decreases, right? And second thing, what I found, there is a lag, that is the execution part, right? So, I mean, let's say 40-50 farmers, they form FPOs, right? Only the CEOs, directors, or few of the active members, they only knows what is happening inside. It's not passing on the communication or information to the last member of that particular FPO, right? That is one thing. Second thing, FPOs always looks for the higher price compared to a market or wherever. The ultimate aim is that to get a good price for their produce, right? And apart from that also, they always need some kind of confirmation and the payment options as well. कि हमारा payment हमें time पे मिलना चाहिए. जो भी माल है वो हर किसी को लेना चाहिए. So these are the two major objectives for an FPO. Whatever, it may be fruits, vegetable, it may be any kind of commodities, end of the day they need to sell, right? So there also I found a gap where we are simply focusing more towards the price point as per the market, right? There is a two factors to that. One is a direct price, another is the indirect way of getting the benefits. We are not, both are, price is your tangible things, and the benefits, those are really intangible, right? You cannot do it. So what are the intangible things and how it impacts to get more benefit, and which will give you a longer way to associate with any of the buyers, right? Like we can help all those FPOs through a route optimization. Let's say there are 5 villages are there, and each village is having 4-5 products of 2 tons each, right? So where to pick first, right? If I pick first from the A, then it may be I need a smaller vehicle. If I second vehicle, let's say from a B village, I need a bigger vehicle. So that optimization can be doable, right? What one trying to do, right? So there also intangible value is there, where the prices of right now we are not considering at all the logistics cost as well, right? The buying price at the source versus the buying price or the landing price at the buyer's place, there is a huge difference, right? आप सभी न्यूज़ में देखे होंगे, आलू 10 रुपए में खरीद रहे हैं, ये लोग 50 रुपए में बेच रहे हैं. So delta of that 40 rupees is what? I'm not keeping all the margin. The margin, and it's an erosion of margin. It goes in between, right? So multiple stakeholders are there. So how if you can connect through different logistics partners and route optimization, that is one thing. FPOs always want in bulk, right? So you don't have every time bulk buyers will be available, right? So that can be also negotiated. That can also, they can work on a smaller pack size as well, a retail pack size as well. They will get good price for that as well, right? So those are the things: route optimization, packaging, rest all finance, inputs, know-how, technology. People are there to provide. A lot of institution has come up, a lot of agri-tech platform has come up. So we are trying to, for our companies, trying to get all those guys on our board, so that the ultimate benefit goes to the farmer or the FPOs. So those are some points what as a consumer points or a buyer perspective, what I want to put forward. So if FPOs can work upon that, definitely the benefit will be there. Yeah.
Thank you. It's very interesting, very perceptive observation, and also in terms of how you plan your engagement, there are also village-specific issues that also come up on how you plan and how you engage. Shambhuji, you probably has done the maximum amount of work in terms of trying to understand the different elements in the ecosystem. So what's your take? Now we have heard stories from Subhendu saying there's a transformation in progress, and there is an increasing recognition of the FPO space when you compare different points of time. And we have got the new age players coming in, market platforms approaching FPOs with the customer interface on the other side. So how do you see the ecosystem playing out, and what might be some of the elements that look real?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Srini. So I just want to try and bring to the discussion some of the narratives on FPOs. We may take a parallel with regard to demonetization, then the narratives keep changing. So there are some narratives that we need to remind ourselves of. So let's start with, the Doubling Farm Income Report, 285 plus references to FPOs, and FPOs being seen as the institution and as an engine of growth. So anything and everything, FPOs are mentioned, and that has driven policy to a certain extent, leading to this 10,000 FPO policy. So that's one very strong kind of narrative from the policy side. From the knowledge on cooperatives, I think again from the 21st century, we are seeing a shift from the discourse on cooperatives to the discussion on producer organizations internationally through World Bank's report in 2007 onwards. And there's been a support to producer organizations across. Within India, it is clear that the FPO discourse has brought in much more inclusion of small farmers as opposed to cooperatives which had larger farmers, more gender based FPOs in form of cooperatives. I think they've been much lower, spread in tribal areas beyond some of the geographies of Western India and Southern India into even UP and other kinds of places. So this is kind of reasonably known. And I think sometimes the narrative that is often not mentioned, but suddenly comes up when there is a challenge. The most prominent of it was the discussion on the farm laws. The laws themselves didn't mention FPOs very specific across the three. But when the government found it necessary to defend the farm laws, Yogesh Dwivedi from Madhya Bharat and others would be invoked to try and say, see, here is the way by which we look at agriculture reform. I think what is the interesting here is that potentially FPO is the space which can provide an via media between the two extremes. One is saying farm laws are complete corporate takeover, and the other that says nothing like this is the 1991 moment in agriculture. So here's an opportunity for an institution to try and provide a positive frame of engaging with the markets. And I think that narrative has kind of slowed down or sometimes is invoked suddenly. How do you build that? That is a big challenge. That requires a large number of ecosystem players. Now, coming from Anand, one of the big change in the ecosystem is the fact that there's no single institution that has the knowledge, which was there in the case of dairy cooperatives. You had an IRMA, you had an NDDB, everything you would go there and then you would get all the kind of knowledge. So I think now knowledge is much more distributed. It's very important for us to keep in touch with people who are practitioners, who are able to give ground level knowledge and work along to try and generate newer kind of information. So very briefly, I think now we know that FPOs are ubiquitous. Everywhere there is a FPO, so to speak. But many of them are stillborn. The APU report says 79% of the FPOs that have been created in the last few years have capital of less than 1 lakh, social equity of less than 1 lakh. So the potential for them to scale is low. There's so much expectations of this baby kind of institution, which Surya was mentioning this morning, that, the framing is sometimes seriously problematic. So at one level, the very institutions that brought out the FPO movement are now told, you people are good in social mobilization, but very, very bad in market. Therefore, we will get some consulting firms and others, and they know how to deal with the market better. And so that's one part of the narrative. But even if you want to push that narrative, you don't go the whole hog. So for example, and that's why this context of the MSME context is important, that if you want to treat it as an enterprise, why isn't that FPO is treated as a social enterprise, as a startup? So for a startup, it's okay to make no profit for 10 years and you still get finance in. But for an FPO, every first year you have to be profitable. So this is the kind of wrong expectations that we have about this nascent institution. The ecosystem, what we have noticed, we are doing a case study of 15 cases of FPOs across the country. 7 of them are women-led. We have about 5 of our co-authors in this hall as well. What we've noticed clearly is that, and all these FPOs that we've studied are before the 10,000 FPO policy scheme. Very few have taken support even from NABARD, which has been there for a while, a little bit perhaps from SFAC. 3 of them are federations. So you have an ecosystem where the FPO federations are hardly supported. There is no government scheme to support the secondary level institutions that can actually be market facing. On the other side, it has taken a lot of while for these pioneers to get to the stage where they've been getting 1 crore, lots of fluctuating fortunes, some years doing well, MSP is brilliant, 1 year, next year it doesn't exist. So all this learning has happened. Now it is clear from what Shubhendu has also mentioned, and probably what many of us are aware, is that the same time frame required to reach that 1 crore is now coming down significantly because of the presence of the ecosystem. So there are positive elements of it, but I think the biggest challenge that we will continue to face is this unrealistic expectation and also the framing of this narrative. So it can't just be a matter of convenience. Just 2 other points I'd like to bring is also this point about this idea that mere aggregation alone will solve the problem. We collect this produce and then sell it to a corporate, it will happen. This market is a highly unequal exchange. FPOs have to have the capacity to build this up. So if you're looking at a Krishidan kind of FPO, we realize that they're able to take contract farming with Balaji ISKCON after 4-5 years where they have picked up those skills. So we need to have that ecosystem support where they get up to that place. The second point, which I think is worth looking at, is this whole issue of sustainability, which was what we discussed in the last session. So the FPOs just working on the agri input side and being the last mile delivery agent for agri input companies is the direction in which many of the FPOs are moving. And I think they're losing out on this opportunity of FPOs being the the intermediaries for bringing about sustainable agriculture, and that's an area that the FPO ecosystem should be moving toward.
Thank you, Shambhu. Classic. Covered a wide ground and so crisply, and pulled out things which were still not really visible. I think one of the stark questions probably which we might try to address later is, yeah, there are lots of babies out there. Some of them have grown into adults. They're able to find their with some support. Who is going to babysit those who are remaining babies, which is practically around 70% FPOs that have been formed so far. Later on, I'm going to ask both these gentlemen, how do they look at babies? So, but that's for later. Michael, I just turn to you briefly, because you punched our card when you talked about this survey. Since India was one of the countries that was surveyed, was there something that came out on the lines of what kind of financing FPOs are looking for in India? Is it some basic money to start operations, or is it marketing credit or something very specific? The other thing attached to that, did you come across any interest rate sensitivity as part of the survey? Was it one of the questions, whether there was any feedback on that?
Thanks for that question. So as I mentioned, in our survey, we covered these 5 different regions, and India, which we ended up really treating as its own region. Ultimately, we found that even by covering 40 farmers' organizations in India alone, out of the 267 that were covered totally, we still just were not getting a full picture of the diversity of different types of FPOs, but also, I think, a clear picture of any of the common issues that that they face. So ultimately, the report itself has sort of a caveat that's saying, while India was covered for the purposes of this report, we had to leave it out and use the other regions, which really come down to Southeast Asia, West Africa, and East Africa, for comparison purposes. And that's what we're doing because it's a global survey. And so what was useful for us was to be able to try to tease out what is comparable across these regions in terms of existing access. And so what I can tell you there is that, interestingly, it really varies. It is very regionally specific. And some of the points that we see of comparison is that the willingness of the financial sector to actually engage, which I think has everything to do with the ecosystem, because it's basically having the incentives in place, having the motivations, but also having the tools and skill sets within the financial institutions, which are lacking in most regions, was a huge factor. In India, we're really sort of tripped up in terms of how do we compare this, because we do have this priority sector lending. So we know that there's, at least the incentive to build up the skills within the institutions, but we're also finding that many of the FPOs, at least that we covered, they actually had the lowest amount of access to funding on average of any of the FPOs in any region. Now again, I don't know if that's actually reflective of reality, but we also see that Membership size, which we expected would really drive access to finance, just did not work in India, because we have FPOs that just have hundreds of thousands of members that still have no access. It's somewhat different in other regions, but again, it seems to be more driven by the actual maturity of the market, as we found in Southeast Asia, than merely the size or the percentage of women, or any of those other factors. I think some of the interesting things that did actually come out that were some of the commonalities were around, I think, two of the areas that we did look at, which are not easily addressed. But green finance, which is a really important topic for us. The questions that we asked were around, what are the actual activities that you are undertaking in terms of climate change and the impact on your operations? And there we found an enormous percentage of FPOs that answered, yes, we do partake in some type of activity related to the effects of climate change. And that included India. When we asked them, how do you finance this? And do you have any specific dedicated sources of funding to address these needs? We found out of 267 institutions covered, 6 that actually had accessed some dedicated sources of funding. Some was funding through project related, so there is some funding there, but it doesn't cover any of the collateral needs in terms of, you know, the fact that they still have other debts to honor, and they're just receiving this funding that's not addressing any of those, especially if they have to, you know, really affect their production operations in order to address these climate issues. Another last one that I would add is that when asked what types of services they would like to provide their members with, many of them answered that they wanted to get more emergency lending to provide their members, and insurance. And for us, this was all followed up with discussions with farmers organizations in order to validate and interpret the findings. But there was a clear understanding that these crises that we're undergoing, you know, between COVID, climate change, you know, other conflict-related crises, are really affecting the stability of the cash flow, and, you know, the fact that some of these institutions have to pivot in order to adapt to a changing environment or climate. And their members have to, you know, survive, exactly. And more, beyond the working capital needs that everyone needs, and that goes to your first question. Working capital is by far the #1 requested, but there are these other types of needs that are more emergency related, I would say.
Thank you, Michael. I think that's quite interesting. You say you didn't find Indian data comparable because of the better availability induced by policy, banking system response to what happens. And I'll just move to you because it's a financial literate question. Now the situation has improved. लोगों को ज़्यादा लोन मिल रहा है FPO को compared to 5 years back. Do you find in your dealings with FPOs that there is an interest rate sensitivity? That FPOs वो 18% चार्ज कर रहे हैं, 20% चार्ज कर रहा है, कि इतने में हमको लोन लेना है. पहले जो मिलता ही नहीं, we don't need any loan at all. 2, अरे यार ये हमको ये 5% में मिलेगा तो लेंगे, but I won't take it at anything more than. Is there a sensitivity, a block that And is it working in their interest or not? The awareness of why, what for I borrow, at what cost, and how it translates to anything that the FPO wants.
Thank you, sir. This dimension of interest rate sensitivity and the opportunity cost, two sides of the same coin, is more a emotional discussion that often happens rather than a logical and factual discussion. Right? And it's again more by the concern on the rate of interest is more by the ecosystem players and people who support the FPOs than the FPOs themselves. Right? There are two dimensions of engaging with the rates of interest conversations that we have seen. One dimension is the immediate comparison to the banks. They say, अरे बैंक में तो 9% में मिलता है, 8% में मिलता है, हमें तो छूट मिल रहा है. Correct. Which is a fact. But are you getting it is the question that needs to be asked. If you are getting it, then I should not be in your, at your doorstep thinking whether we would be able to work or not. Two, most of them may not also be aware of what is the trade-off that I am going to have. I think the second one, which is the opportunity cost dimension, is where most of us, the ecosystem players, will have to play a role to tell them that rate of interest is one important dimension for you to make a decision whether you have to borrow or not, for sure. There has to be a complete transparency in terms of what are you signing up for. But that is not a standalone metric that one has to see. You have to compare vis-a-vis what are the other aspects, especially around the opportunity cost. So I'll just share one example, sir, and you were there in that conversation when we had that, that conversation when we were coming from Shillong to Guwahati, and this is for the, for the audience. There is this entity which is, in a way, taking care of about 330 FPOs, and the conversation was with one of the, FPOs, where they said there is an opportunity to invest about 15 lakhs of money. And in their words, the return is about 10 additional lakhs. 15 lakh पे खरीदो आप अरेका नट, ferment करके 3 महीने के बाद, after 3 months, you give it back to the same buyer and make about 10 lakhs additional, which is about 25 lakhs in 3 months. So we asked them, how many loads do you do? They said 1 load. And why not the other, couple of more loads? Because if that is the return, you should be able to do. They said, we don't have access to the working capital, right? And we said, okay, at what rate would you be able to borrow? They said, the first lot that we get is at 10%. And our question was, okay, if I offer you at 18%, would you be able to take? The question is, the answer is, 18% is too expensive, we would not be able to make. So we said, okay, why don't we do Ganit? Why don't we do maths? Let us calculate. Your 15 lakhs for 3 months at 10% annualized will come to about 37,500 rupees as actual outflow for you. And your 15 lakhs at 18% for 3 months annualized is 67,500. The difference between 10% and 18% money is 30,000 rupees. And your return is 10 lakhs. Even if we say that it is an inflated one and only 1/3 is the return, we are basically talking of 3 lakhs of additional return. And on that, if you pay an additional of 30,000 rupees, you are still better off making 2,70,000 rupees for 3 months. Can we engage in that kind of a conversation, right? Where the interest rate is in the dimension of what is the opportunity cost that you have, and agriculture is time sensitive. There is no point in getting your 9% money or even free money for that matter when the vegetative stage of the crop is over and you are ready to harvest, because there is nothing for you to harvest in any case. Even if it is free money, it doesn't make any sense. So you have to invest when you need and when access is more important. And one of the things that I have, sorry, I hope I'm not stepping beyond my brief, but one of the things that I definitely notice is when the policymakers are in their roles, they basically talk about the interest rate sensitivity and why it is important that it has to be cheaper. The moment they retire and get into the sector, they say, no, access is more important than. Very few people, like, Surya sir, have the feet on the ground, I would say. But many people talk about interest rate from their perspective. It is that paternalistic approach that we have, saying, "Mera bacha itna hi pay karega." But bacha bhuka hai. Right? No. I will serve you 7-course meal. I need just bread. No, wait for 7-course meal. There is one scheme that is cooking. That scheme will be, through the structure, and then, you are redeemed forever. But I should be there to be redeemed.
When you are old enough, you will get the meal.
Right. So, correct. But at the same time, if we build a credible track record of having borrowed, I'm not saying perpetually the entity should require to borrow at 18%. It is inefficient. And ideally speaking, they have to be lent money at cheaper rates than what a corporate could handle. And eventually they have to go there. But life is, squint is better than blind. You better do something, build the credit history, then get into cheaper funding and go on. And for the sake of record, my first borrowing as Samunnati in 2016, March 31st, 2016 is when I borrowed my first 1 crore. Weighted average price of that borrowing was 21.75% for me. Now my weighted average borrowing is about 12.5%, 13%. That journey would not, the same lender who has given 1 crore at 21.75 would have lent about 600 crores to me from then onwards. That lender's rate interest is about 12%. So it eventually happens. You have to start somewhere. And we as ecosystem players have the responsibility to handhold the FPOs that when the amounts are smaller, don't worry about the price, as long as what you are making is better than what you are paying. And that difference is what you should look at, determining whether you should borrow or not, rather than saying that I will not borrow or let the seasons go. And the last point is, if that decision is made by the FPO, then there is hope for the FPO. If that decision is being made by someone else for the FPO, then we have a problem.
Thanks, Anil. Thank you. Anil in between said access is important. He meant access in the truest sense, access to finance and access. Now, he is asking the question that he has asked, and also the interesting anecdote that he provided. One, I would request you to put it in Hindi because there are a lot of your constituents here. And then what is your response? How do you look at the issue of the interest price versus what is the opportunity price of the credit?
सर जो पूछ रहे हैं मैं थोड़ा सा हिंदी में भी कह दूं ताकि बाकी सबको भी समझ में आ जाए। सर ये पूछ रहे हैं कि अगर इंटरेस्ट रेट 18% है तो क्या एफपीओ ले सकती है, और अगर जरूरत के टाइम पे नहीं मिला तो क्या फायदा है। सर अपार्ट फ्रॉम द अपॉर्चुनिटी कॉस्ट which is very important, and as you have mentioned very rightly, people say a lot about the cost of interest and all. But in reality, when we as the real practitioners and working in day in and day out with the FPOs, हमने क्या देखा, FPO उस पैसे को कितने बार रोटेट करता है, that is the important thing. पहले हमने भी गलती किया। मैंने मेरे जो सबसे पहले लोन लिया था FWWB से 5 लाख का, उसको हमने 3 महीना आइडल रखा, एक आइटम खरीद के उसको 3 महीना रख लिया। क्या फायदा मिला? आज जो मेरा एफपीओ 20 लाख लोन लिया है, within 1.5 months they have achieved a turnover of 1.5 crores just by rotating that money within 3 days. तो पैसा क्या इंटरेस्ट रेट पे आ रहा है, डेफिनेटली ये मैटर करता है, लेकिन जैसे सर ने कहा कि हर किसी को मिलता नहीं है। मिलता नहीं तो फिर उसके बारे में बात करके क्या फायदा है? कौन टाइमली दे सकता है? हमको आज चाहिए, एप्लीकेशन दिया, 4-5 दिन के अंदर लोन अप्रूव हो गया, मिल गया, खाते में आ गया। उससे बढ़िया बात क्या है, क्योंकि सामने सीड कंपनी, उसको हमको पैसा देना है, प्रोडक्ट खरीदा, एफपीओ को, किसान को पैसा देना है। ये ट्रस्ट जब तक बिल्ड नहीं होगा एफपीओ को, ना तो सीड कंपनी एफपीओ को सीड देगा, ना तो किसान एफपीओ को अपना प्रोड्यूस देगा। ये ट्रस्ट बिल्ड करने के लिए ये जो लोन अमाउंट है ये बहुत जरूरी है। और जैसे जैसे एफपीओ का भी ट्रांजेक्शन बढ़ता जाएगा, मे बी इंटरेस्ट रेट में भी, आप कौन कह रहा है कि साल भर पैसा लेके रखो? 3 महीना रखो। इनपुट सीजन में लोन लिया, चौथे महीने में रिटर्न कर दिया। Nobody restricts that, and if you see the effective interest rate, Divide it by 4, so 18%, it's hardly some 4.5% effective interest rate for that 3 months. So I think it's not, that's a myth, and we as practitioners would always understand that pain point.
Thank you, Sudhir. Srinivas, I will now turn to you. Because these people finally, they take a lot of time and mind space of FPOs. How do you see the marketing system? Because you are at the market end of things. How the marketing system changed, and are FPOs in a much better position today to access markets and market platforms like yours? Because earlier people will aspire to go and then register with Amazon. And after you register with Amazon, which somebody helps you, all your problems start. You have to have a minimum amount of stock, then it should be available. When you advertise something, you should be able to supply all that, and then are you registered with GST, all that. How is the situation today? And platforms, how effective they are in making FPOs come to terms with the reality of how to deal with it? Is it more friendly?
Yeah. So in my last conversation, I was talking about the expectations from a marketing point of view for a buyer's perspective. What are our expectations towards the FPOs? Here, I will talk about the opportunities. What kind of opportunities lies for the FPOs, right? So then they will fetch it up. So opportunity in terms of, currently I will give you some example. We are doing, there are few aggregators are there, consolidators. They act like FPOs only. There are 10, 15 farmers, they come up and one aggregator is there. They took a small place and they started the business almost last December, right? And we started off a monthly turnover of somewhere around 5 lakh rupees. And today on 19th of Jan, can you believe that they have done almost 4.5 crores of business with us. This is what the trajectory they have crossed within a year's time. So how they succeed on this part, and how we are empowering them to succeed, and what are the opportunities we are giving them to succeed. First of all, a demand predictive analysis, what we are doing it, right? It's a demand-based harvesting pattern. Right now, what is happening? APOs जो है पहले वो निकाल लेते हैं, फिर बेचने की सोचते हैं, right? Where once a harvest is done, then they are looking for the markets. It's the other way around. This is what my requirement would be, and these are the number of let's say how many products or what are the quantities. We priority basis we are providing them, right? Well in advance. As per that, they draw a crop planning, right? Then in that crop planning, we are doing them saying that no, we'll be doing a assure buyback model. And while I'm saying assure buyback model, it's not a contract kind of anything. Whatever A, B, C type of quality you will harvest, and definitely will help you through different other platforms where you will get all those inputs, all those financing, then all this technology, know-how, all those things also will provide you. That is not our core, but yeah, we'll engage with somebody, those who are having the expertise on that particular field. But yeah, we will take it back. And that whatever we'll saying that this is assured buyback, that will take the market price only, not any kind of contract price, so that they will be at par with the market, right? So there are two things, the opportunities here. First, demand-based harvest crop plan. Second, market-based buying. So here they can plan it very in cautious, in a very such a way so that there won't be much kind of wastage, right? And also it's a time driven. So that's the reason we have started doing a lot of growing program in and around Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad. And Chennai, Hyderabad, typically a consumption market, not much around that. They're majorly dependent on your Bangalore market, right, and others. So this is all about the fruits, vegetables, what I'm talking about. But fruits also, like your Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, these are the two states where we have tied up with a lot of farmers, right? All your fruits, Indian fruits, almost 60-70% comes from these 2-3 states. So they the visibility, when there is a differentiation also I came across among the FPOs as well. And that way fruit FPO versus a vegetable FPO, the mindset is also different. Just because the average buying price or average selling price is also very high. Pomegranate, let's say somebody is selling at 150, whereas a Vindi FPO, they are selling at 15 rupees. There is a gap of 10x. So whenever your price goes up, as per that also the mindsets also goes up. So those kind of marketing opportunities what we have given to all those FPOs, I mean, they have started accelerating on that part as well. So what I will request the FPOs, I think they should focus more towards on those part where demand-based harvest will give them a lot of success, right? And also the price points where what are their expectations? As per that, they can do the calculation backward as well, right? So on that basis, consistency will be the key for them. Instead of sending one vehicle in a month, it's better you send part of vehicle on a daily basis, so that anything will missed out, that can be also averaged out. So that way, I think FPO interaction and encourage to all the FPOs participation. So in a buying term would be really helpful, what I feel.
Thank you. That's so encouraging. I wish it is scalable, and more organizations like yours adopt these kind of the approaches to how we market FPOs. What do you call it? Produce. I think just shifting the subject, I would come back to you, the professor. One of the things that we see even in the slightly evolved FPOs is, do they have the ability to plan their business? How do you actually come up with the valid procurement plans, pricing of procurement, establishing procurement system, and that are geared towards retaining member loyalty to the purchase and sale, the patronage of the member to the society or to the FPO. And also the other issue that we talked about, the baby FPOs are the ones which have not really grown. Who will babysit them and then bring them to a level where you take a decision, yes, these people are going to move up. So what kind of resource institutions are there to bring in the business, finance, marketing literacy at the level of FPO, and what kind of resource institutions are needed and are they available today to try and nurse the very small nano stage FPOs to come to some kind of a maturity stage? So what do you see in the market?
Just one or two points I wanted to address somewhat indirectly is in our study of the 12 FPOs and 3 FPO federations, one of the things we noticed, and this relates to the issue of access to finance, is that very few FPOs have had consistent funding from each of the funders or the banks or NBFCs. One year it is this, another year it is someone else. So a lot of transaction costs goes into that. The second part is this issue of how do you read the financial statements of FPOs. So I think one of the things is the lesson that's coming out is to look for multiple metrics rather than only revenue, profitability, and so on. So one could be, has the share capital increased over a period of time? And that gives you an interesting indicator. There are many things which are not reflected in the FPO balance sheet, which is important for the health of the FPO because of grants come through the resource institution. So has the FPO been able to attract money into the, for farmers? Sometimes the benefits to farmers are also not computed enough. So how do we actually bring this out? An important element is not when we talk about the ecosystem, we tend to talk about it at national or even at the state level. But at the FPO level, which might even be at the district, has the ecosystem changed over a period of time? Are more number of players getting involved? Are the KVKs and others getting involved? I think these are the kinds of metrics that we should move towards to better appreciate the health of an institution which is so nascent. The broader thing about this baby FPOs, I think now there is a realization that irrespective of NABARD or SFACs or Government of India scheme, which lasts only for 3 years, a serious-minded resource institution, unlike a consultancy firm which might leave this to their own this thing after 3 years, you have to live with this institution for at least 5 to 6 years. That's the minimum that is required for them to reach this kind of maturity and, of course, there are certain elements to it. NGOs need to let go of these institutions that they've created instead of sometimes micromanaging, which is something that they could probably get off as these capacities are building. And how do you link them with different kinds of market players? And I think just to bring back this point on the need to have a negotiation and conversation, we heard this also when Anil and others were speaking. I'm reminded of this book by Rajni Bakshi, where she made this important distinction between a market and a bazaar. I think it's called Market, Bazaars and bazaars, conversations, and freedom. And I think the point is, even today when Sanjeev is talking about Samaj, Bazaar and Sarkar. So it's not Samaj, market and Sarkar. And the difference between the market and the bazaar is the ability of players to have a conversation and then collectively decide whether it should be 18% or 10% or whatever. And it is in sometimes the space for these kinds of forums which enables this conversation on a level playing field. Because left to themselves, I think farmers have always been having difficulty dealing with market players. Even FPOs will have the same challenge if this element of conversation is not involved in bringing about this change. I mean, that in some sense relates to these baby FPOs. I think it's again, do you have a time frame that is beyond the project period? And are you willing to go beyond the government's logic? So today, a government is pushing you to first register an FPO and then do social mobilization. Government is saying members don't have a right to decide which product has to happen. In Delhi, we will sit and decide for you which district is suitable for which product. Now, I think the whole logic of a collective enterprise is getting reversed. You have to be with the government, you can play with this, but you have to be able to see much, much beyond both the government and the market also. And I think that in that sense, the notion of civil society and FPOs being situated more in the civil society space to bring back this language of farmer empowerment and democratization of the market will continue to remain important.
Thank you, Shambhu. I think quite a number of thoughts that come through in that. And the basic point is you don't think one or two resource institutions alone. Anyone who is in a public or private space who has something to do with an FPO has a role to play in that. And maybe we should look at the metrics of how good an FPO is based on how many such contact, touch points they have in their normal course of business. Are they able to access the resources from wherever it is available instead of waiting for that one Superman to come and say, I will now set right all that.
There's just one small point in terms of incubation and post-incubation support, and I think this we're taking from social enterprise space as well, is that this ownership should be co-ownership. This exclusivity, which happens in incubation space, we said, you are my incubator, you cannot go to anybody else. So, which is what we were trying to break when we set up our incubator. I think the same philosophy should exist here. Today, it might be one resource institution that has brought you to this stage. As the institution grows, you seed space, maybe somebody else can take on. And I think that collective building of the local ecosystem is the direction which will create more buy-in, because members themselves cannot create it. More people have to get into the space.
So I think we are now coming toward the end of the session, I think. I have not still got a chit, but before I get one, let me conclude this. I have a last question, very brief answer. What is that most important element in the ecosystem, just one of them, that you would like to be able to influence? Each one of you should choose one. The answer should be no more than 12 words long. I start with you, Srinivas.
I mean, like a front-end consumer is the king. So in the same way, in the supply side, farmers should be the king. So this is what my take for a FPO or whoever. I mean, the farmer. I mean, every time consumers should not be the king, right? So sometimes it should be farmers should be the king as well. Because end of the day, each produce only going to the consumer. This is my takeaway. So whatever needs to be done towards that, I think we should take all those steps and help those farmers. Yeah.
Yeah, Michael, do we have a choice? Any one element of the ecosystem which you would like to change?
Again, I have to take a more global view, ecosystem for FPOs generally, and for me it is really, I think, on the financing side and developing the type of understanding and ability to assess the risks for FPO investing that allows more of that type of lending to happen.
I would say a collaborative approach by all well-meaning, ecosystem players with the FPO and the member at the center. come together and work further?
I'd say be wary of the government and the market and work towards greater autonomy and independence.
Technology and markets. Technology is going to play a major role in the success of FPUs, integrating everything and supporting the FPU managers in a decision support system.
Okay. Well, what I find is no one has one element, which shows the complexity of the ecosystem in which FPOs play. They have multiple things to deal with. They are promoters, CBBOs, they have multiple things to deal with. There is one question which has come from the audience. It talks about in this ecosystem, where do you see women farmers? What must be done for empowering them or to engage them as active players in FPO? We can have answers from this panel, but what I would counsel is there is a session that is following this, that is entirely about women farmers and women FPOs. So, like Shambhu said, let us have some more patience, as in the case of FPOs, for an answer to this question. Of course, women are everywhere in agriculture. It's getting feminized rapidly. So, we resist the temptation to answer this question. To sum up, yeah, we had a very good range of opinions coming out. We did discuss where FPOs are operating. They are working in a place that is normally new institutions come out in a policy vacuum. They try and find space, then some rules are written, something to regulate. But FPOs were born in a bed that was rich with policy, because they were in a special provision was written into the Companies Act in what do you call early 2000 or late 1999 after Mr. Alak's report. So in 2000 it started. And then we have been continuously tweaking the rules here and there and then bringing new institutional forms. Then schemes for promoting them came in. Now we have got close to around 20,000 FPOs. Nobody knows the exact number. And we are not going to know that in a hurry for another 2-3 years. But then a lot of them have issues. These issues come from high expectation, which was highlighted by the panel here. And these also come from not just high expectations of the policy establishment promoters, even the members. The patience that is required to make a new entity work well and become sustainable, I'm not using the word profitable here, that the members also should be willing to provide that space. I have put in 500, मैंने 500 रुपया शेयर में भराया, लेकिन इन्होंने कुछ प्रॉफिट हमको वापस नहीं दिया है. मतलब मंदिर में जाते हैं, भगवान को प्रार्थना करते हैं, भगवान का हुंडी में भी कुछ पैसा डालते हैं. ये मतलब नहीं कि भगवान अगला दिन आके हमको कुछ करेगा. हम तो साल भर करते रहते हैं, पूरा जिंदगी करते रहते हैं प्रेयर. कभी होता है कि जो अच्छा होता है बोलते हैं तो भगवान से हुआ है. मतलब एफपीओ जो है हमारा भगवान होना चाहिए. वेयर वी गो एवरी डे, रोज जैसे मंदिर जाते हैं वैसे हमारा जो व्यवहार एफपीओ के साथ, दैट शुड रिमेन गुड. तब कुछ हमारा अच्छा हो सकता है. तो ये बोलते हैं ना, हमारा जो विश्वास का पूंजी जो बोला था पहले, ये विश्वास का पूंजी हमारा एफपीओ के ऊपर भी होना चाहिए. मेंबर से एफपीओ का वो रिश्ता अच्छा रहेगा, तब एफपीओ का बाहर मार्केट में बैंक से, फाइनेंस इंस्टीट्यूशन से, गवर्नमेंट से रिश्ता वो भी अच्छा रहेगा. तो दोनों साइड का विश्वास होनी चाहिए. फिर आई थिंक based on what we have said, finally what we said is, one is the patience that is required to ensure that these become, because these are not those startups which have cash to burn for 5 years and then we do not know. Because there is no cash to burn. This is share capital coming from members. Finally someone should answer to the members. So can we make whatever institution that we set up go? This is also a strong, what do you call, thing for the government to look at. I don't create 10,000 wild flowers to bloom. I should have a way of harvesting and put them in a bouquet and then make it make sense. The second, of course, is markets may not be forgiving just because it comes from farmers. ये हमारे कृषि भाइयों ने तो उत्पादन किया है, इसलिए मार्केट में अच्छा इसको प्राइस मिलेगा, ऐसा नहीं. वैसे मार्केट कम देता है, हम अकेला जाते हैं, इसलिए तो हम एफपीओ फार्म किया है. तो then we should have the faith of aggregating, collecting, ensure that market becomes fair because we are together. हम सब इकट्ठा होके जाते हैं तो मार्केट जरा हमारे साथ अच्छा बातचीत करेगा, नहीं है तो वो नहीं करेगा. दिस ऑल्सो द लर्निंग दैट कम्स थ्रू. थर्ड, द टेक्नोलॉजी पार्ट की साइड, ऐसा नहीं है कि हम रोज आज कैसे शुरू हुआ ऐसे ही नहीं रह सकते. हमारे पास भी कुछ टेक्नोलॉजी आना चाहिए. कैसे हम अकाउंटिंग करते हैं, मेंबर का अकाउंट कैसे रखते हैं, उनका पैसा कैसे हम, ये सबके बारे में जो जानकारी जिनके पास है जैसे प्रोफेसर ने बोला है, वो लोकली तमाम इंस्टीट्यूशन है उनसे जानकारी हम लेके इस्तेमाल करेंगे ताकि हमारा जो कैपेसिटी बढ़ेगी। तो लेकिन ये सब करने के बाद भी कुदरत का कुछ असर भी पड़ता है हमारे ऊपर। जितना भी अच्छा करेंगे 3 साल में 4 साल में एक बार प्रॉब्लम होती है, उसको क्या इलाज हो सकता है, उसका इंश्योरेंस का है या दूसरा कुछ मैकेनिज्म है, वो भी हमारे मेंबर्स इकट्ठे होंगे। एफपीओ को बोलना है ये भी कुछ करो, अगर मार्केट में पैसा एकदम से गिर गया इसको कैसे हम मैनेज करेंगे, उसका सिस्टम है क्या, या उत्पादन नहीं हुआ है क्योंकि बारिश नहीं हुआ, उसके लिए कुछ इलाज है क्या। कुछ कुछ तो है, पूरा इलाज तो नहीं है, लेकिन कम से कम दर्द कम करने का तो दवा है। कम से कम ये एफपीओ उसको क्या लेके हमारे पास पहुंचा सकता है। सो वी हैव टू लुक एट व्हाट आर द सॉल्यूशंस अवेलेबल, एंड अगर जो बाकी रह गया वो सामने लेके आएंगे गवर्नमेंट के। मतलब ये सब का तो कुछ इलाज आप ढूंढ लो, क्योंकि हमारे पास नहीं है। जितने भी लोग उधर मार्केट में उनके पास भी इसको इलाज नहीं है, आप जरा कुछ करो करके गवर्नमेंट के पास लेके आए। सो thank you all. It has been an excellent discussion, and I thank you audience for your patience. And that one question, please wait for another 10-15 minutes. Yes, you want to say something? जी,
आइडियल मेंबरशिप क्या होता है? जैसे 500 मेंबर होते हैं, लेकिन मैं एफपीओ काम करता है 150 के साथ, तो बढ़ाते रहना चाहिए कि जो है एग्जिस्टिंग उसके साथ ही काम करना चाहिए। ठीक है, बाकी पॉलिसी डिपेंड बोलते हैं कि आप मेंबरशिप बढ़ाओ, लेकिन जैसे जैसे मेंबरशिप बढ़ता जाएगा वो परसेंटेज घटता जाएगा। जैसे 500 के साथ काम कर 500 मेंबर्स है लेकिन काम 100 के साथ ही करते हैं, फिर वो 700 हो जाएगा तो वो 100-150 बहुत कम लगने लगेगा। तो आइडियल साइज क्या होना चाहिए, मैं ये जानना चाहता हूँ आपसे।
जरा डिटेल आपसे मैं ट्राई कर बात करूंगा। सेक्शन में कितना मेंबर आपके पास है वो एक है, दूसरा है कितना मेंबर आपसे हर साल व्यवहार करता है, उसका ऊपर है पूरा। ठीक है, इसके बारे में बाहर आके आपसे बात करूंगा। ठीक है, थैंक यू ऑल।
I thank all our panelists for this enriching discussion, sharing their experience in dealing with the FPOs and the importance of strengthening ecosystem support for successful functioning of the FPOs. We'll now take a short tea break and we'll reconvene at 3:45 p.m. for track 3 session 2, which is on engineering farmer collectives. Thank you.